Hey, what's up? It's Josh Slocum, running coach and owner of Elemental Running, and today I want to talk about running easy. I have gained quite a following on TikTok, kind of centered around this idea that most people sort of chronically run a little bit too hard most of the time. And I want to talk today in a little more detail about how that is overall detrimental to your training. Let's talk about the ways that you could quantify intensity of a run. Generally speaking, there's three things you could do. You could measure pace, heart rate, or perceived level of effort. The reason that I don't like pace so much is because you can pick up any running textbook or running book and you can say, okay, well, I can run a 5K in 20 minutes or so. And I'll give you a table that lists, what pace your easy run should be at. The problem is this sets up sort of a scenario where every time you're having an easy run, you get to check yourself and say, well, did I run slower or faster or exactly at that pace? And it sort of implies that, on an almost daily cycle, you could get feedback in terms of whether or not you're getting better or getting worse. The problem is the adaptations that come from lots of low intensity miles don't happen this quickly. And so if you're targeted to run 8-minute per mile pace, for instance, then one day if you're tired or coming off of a hard workout, maybe you didn't get that much sleep, maybe you're dehydrated or didn't eat that well, and you can only manage 8:30 pace, all of a sudden you're feeling pretty bad, feeling like you're progressing in the wrong direction, which is not necessarily the case. I'll even get people who take this a step further and will reach out and say things like, hey, I can normally do 8-minute pace just fine, but I was traveling and had to do a run on a hilly route and I could barely manage 9-minute miles and I was so discouraged. What should I do? And when you say statements like this out loud, it becomes really obvious that any kind of variable, weather, terrain, anything like that, anything that makes the conditions less than ideal is going to cause you to run at a slower pace. Even at the same level of fitness, it doesn't imply that you're somehow less fit because on Wednesday you could only manage 9-minute pace when on Monday you were doing 8-minute pace. I think heart rate is a little bit better because your heart rate will fluctuate with things like your energy levels, how recovered you are, how much sleep you got, hydration, temperature, going up a hill, things like this. I especially like heart rate for making sure you're going easy enough on recovery days, setting a maximum heart rate level and trying to stay below that on a recovery day. But even heart rate kind of creates these micro scenarios where you, especially if you're looking at it on your watch, or you've got it connected from a chest strap to a watch, you're kind of constantly looking at it and you're sort of removing your own thought process from, the indications of how hard that you're going. And what I really like to do is have people become really in tune with their bodies and know if they're going, at the appropriate intensity on, easy and recovery days. And so this is why, for all of the athletes that I coach, and most of the advice that I give out on TikTok is to monitor all of your easy and recovery runs based on your level of perceived exertion. Maybe even leave the watch at home. The pace is sort of irrelevant. Now, if you've got a little bit of experience and some fitness under your belt, you can keep track of this based on, being able to run at a conversational pace like I'm doing now. My breathing isn't extremely strange such that I can't form complete sentences, and I know that means to me that I'm not taking it too hard. Another way to do this would be able to see if I could breathe in and out through only my nose. Not that I should necessarily breathe that way for the entire run, but if I'm going easy enough, I should be able to supply enough oxygen to my muscles through just breathing in through my nose only. Another way to think about this is to think that you ought to finish a run an easy run, for example, and feel like if you needed to, you could go out for several more miles. I find that people are very frequently finishing runs at the point of complete and total exhaustion, and that a lot of people are kind of chronically, reaching this point on most of the runs that they do. If you're newer to running, then until you build up the right kind of adaptations, it's very unlikely that you'll get to a point where you feel like you can run at a conversational pace. And this can be a little bit frustrating. The thing to focus on here is just making sure that you're not going out on every single run and finishing just completely exhausted as if you couldn't possibly take another step. If you are in this position, and you need to really think about slowing down. And one pushback that I hear frequently is that oh, if I slow down anymore, I'm gonna be walking. And it's totally okay for this to be the case. If that is the case, then you should consider alternating bouts of running and walking until you've built up, the right kind of adaptations to be able to run for a little bit longer. So to recap all of this, I'd prefer, in all of your easy runs and your recovery runs, that you track your relative perceived exertion. And, if you're not comfortable with this, then try heart rate. I especially like this on an easy day, a really easy recovery day. And lastly, I'd prefer you not keep track of your pace, because you're gonna get caught in this comparison game, not only to other people on Strava, but to yourself day after day, and you're just not gonna be making adaptations that warrant that kind of comparison all the time. Just a clarifying point, I'm not saying don't track pace or heart rate and use that to indicate your fitness changes over months and years. What I'm saying is it's not good for you to have sort of unfettered access to your pace and your heart rate instantaneously at every single point of your run, for you to just be constantly judging how the run is going and how you are overall as a runner, because it just doesn't work that way. Okay, so if you buy into this kind of training ideology, then the natural question that comes next is, well, if my goal is to get faster, then why do I need to spend all my time, thinking about running easy at a conversational pace? And the answer is that yes, if your goal is to get faster, you absolutely have to practice running faster. But you don't have to do it nearly as much as you think. And in fact, running fast too frequently is counterproductive to your progress as a distance runner. And I'll expand on this more in a later video, but suffice it to say that, as distance runners, our main goal really, no matter what event we're training for, is to make it such that our bodies can produce ATP at race pace for as long as possible. And it turns out that for events greater than a mile or two, by far the biggest limiter to this ATP production at race pace is our aerobic capacity, or our ability to produce ATP at relatively low intensities when there is plenty of oxygen around. We're breaking down sugars fully to produce ATP, or even oxidizing fats. So I'll talk about that later, but the energy systems really kind of dictate why it's better to mostly run slow.